breaking down those barriers, breaking down, traditional grievances that are for what? For nothing.
Yeah.
For nothing. They're rubbish, right? And bringing people together. And what brings people together? It's money, right? It's wealth. It's opportunity,
In any society.
In any society. In any society.
G'day and Shalom Alochon. My name is Ninos Kanna and welcome to episode 194 of the Assyrian podcast. This episode is brought to you by all of us here at the Assyrian podcast. We love bringing you stories of Assyrians from around the world, and we hope you continue to listen and share our episodes. A broadcaster in Australia had a great slogan, 6 billion stories and counting. We always ask you, our listener, for any tips on who we can feature, not because we really need interesting stories, but because every story is interesting. On that, today's guest I've known for a few years. We usually meet for a coffee in downtown Sydney and talk about the world. They're pretty blunt conversations, sometimes even confronting, but that's important. It's how we grow as people. While the usual course is for a professional to get educated and then embark on their career, our guest did the reverse. He began working and then sought higher education. It gives him a different insight and aura, that's for sure. Our regular coffee meets involve lots of talk about geopolitics, and I certainly didn't shy away from it in this episode. We Assyrians are dispossessed. We're victims of history. We're still punished by it today. We've been at the butt end of intersecting empires, and I really think geopolitics is an integral part of understanding our plight. Today's guest writes about geopolitics for the South China Morning Post. For those who don't know, the South China Morning Post is the premier English language newspaper in all of Asia. The message of our conversation always points to one objective: freedom through wealth. Not in a Robert Kiyosaki sense, but rather a kind of a Black Panther style message. A message of self-sufficiency and empowerment. With that, I'll leave you to it. Short and punchy. Dr. George Marano, our guest this week, episode 194. Yalla, let's go. George Marano, welcome to the Assyrian podcast.
Thank you for having me, Ninos.
It's my pleasure. Did you like the steak?
That was very nice. You've done very well.
Thank you. We had a steak. I brought him over for a steak. I think that's what I need to do to get guests these days, but
I'm a very cheap guest.
No, it was a good steak. Thanks for coming.
It's my pleasure.
I've known you for 4 years?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, 4 years. I'm a bit of a weirdo. Like, I Googled you, and the first thing I saw were the articles, but we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
But one thing that I found to be interesting is your background. So could you tell us where you were born?
Yeah, I was born here in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in 1977 in the old Fairfield Hospital for those who can remember.
Yeah.
And we've been living in the same house since January 1978. My mother still lives at the same residence, and that's in Bosley Park.
Wow.
But yeah, I've done quite a bit of a full circle around the world, and then come back to Sydney again.
Yeah. You work in consulting right now?
Yeah, I own my own strategic management consulting firm.
But how did you start in the industry?
Well, I originally was a senior consultant over at Deloitte's, and then COVID hit, and I was a contractor with them, and that engagement terminated. And then, halfway through COVID-19, I decided to do it for myself. Mm-hmm. I thought I'd, as they say in Assyrian, mamorna rishi, and the very common term.
Yes.
For those who don't speak Assyrian, it means, to trouble your head, right? So in a literal sense.
Give yourself a headache.
Yeah, give yourself a headache. So I started my own firm, and I mean, this is we're coming on to 2 years now, and I'm happy with the progress, but I think there's bigger and brighter things.
But tell us about the very beginning. So, what was your first job when you finished school?
My first job in school was I worked in a mail room delivering mail for a stockbroking firm back in 1997, and I was in the financial markets up until 2008.
Okay.
So I worked for a lot of stockbroking firms, and then the last part of my my engagement with the financial markets was as a hedge fund trader, and I kind of rode that wave of what they call market exuberance through 2006, 2007, and then that crash in 2008. I was a front seat viewer in all that.
Yep. What happened after the GFC?
Well, after the GFC,
By the way, the GFC is what Australians call the global financial crisis.
Yeah, so after that, I ended up in Indonesia. I kind of was in a bit of la-la land, like many other people, after that kind of cataclysmic event.
Yeah.
I ended up assisting some guys who were setting up a mining company in Indonesia, and they were predominantly engineers and geologists and so forth. And they needed somebody with a bit of financial market background to help with, a few of the financials, as well as getting some offtake and so forth because it was a coal mining project.
What's offtake?
Offtake is you kind of pre-sell production to either traders or end users or so forth.
Okay.
And because of my financial markets background, I could price it and negotiate the terms and conditions and so forth of that. So that was my entry point into the mining industry. And then from that, through sheer osmosis, I kind of got a bit more of an understanding of how mining worked. And then towards the end of the project, I ended up being the general manager over in Indonesia.
Wow. When was that?
This was in 2009 and 2010.
Okay, so you moved to Indonesia.
Yeah, I lived in Indonesia for a year and a half.
Which city? Jakarta?
Yeah, it was predominantly in Jakarta. That's where the office was, but then our actual mine sites were in Sumatra.
Okay.
So they were on the western side of Sumatra. Mm-hmm. It was an interesting experience.
Did you want to go to Indonesia?
Yeah, I jumped at the experience.
You jumped at it?
Yeah. I've always had a high tolerance for risk, and in many things in life, I took the unconventional path.
Yeah.
I didn't see it as a money making venture, but more as an experience.
Uh-huh.
Understanding something, and I've always gravitated to industries and to international secondments for the learning aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I always liked going to new places, experiencing new things. I've come to realise that, through reflection, that I like to throw myself in the deep end.
But you have Assyrian parents.
Yeah, I do.
So what did they say?
They're not very happy. They weren't very happy. My father's passed away, but my mother's still alive, and she's thank you. And she's still not. Of all the accomplishments, her. For a mother's son's greatest accomplishment is to get married and have children, right? Which is the kind of the final frontier. So I'm kind of treasuring my singledom, but nonetheless, it's I'm sure it's the day will come.
Yeah. I can imagine the response. Ekana Indonesia. Was that?
Yeah. Look, but there was many. At that time there was a few Assyrians that were coming as refugees through Indonesia. Mm-hmm. So it was still on the radar, Mm. But it was it's the unknown.
Yeah.
My father's very open-minded.
Yeah.
My mother was, she was a little bit worried, with the, how it should be careful, so on and so forth. But I mean, they were very supportive. They've always been slightly supportive. Mm. Me personally, I'm very headstrong,
Yeah.
So I've always done what I wanted to do. I never listened to anybody.
Yeah. I was going to ask about Indonesia. Did you find comfort in that society?
I found a lot more respect than I get here in Australia.
Okay. How so and why?
Look, I think in Australia there's still the perception of we're foreigners, even though we're born here. But when Indonesia, it was a very formative moment in that. I was a respected business leader over there. People would listen to what I say. People would ask for my opinion. I don't know whether it was just the age, the position, the experience, and so forth. I mean, I kind of have that now in some degree, but that's come after. That's come after a whole bunch of bits and pieces, right?
Yeah.
But it was that. It was really that was that experience in Indonesia.
Yeah.
What drove me to get an education and to really, because I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed international business. I enjoyed setting up the company. I enjoyed.
When you say education, you started work out after high school?
Yeah. So I don't have
uni.
I didn't go to university. I don't have an undergraduate degree.
Okay. But you have a PhD now.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So what was the path, and how did the path come about for you for educating or having higher levels of education?
Well, I mean, I started off like many kind of mature age students who sit at the cusp of middle management and are thinking, well, how do I take that next step up? Well, we automatically revert to, I don't have an education, so I'll seek out something. And the normal degree that's sought after these days is an MBA, an executive MBA, especially for people who don't have an undergraduate degree. There's a plethora of them online and so forth. And I gravitated towards that, thinking that, the MBA will give me that boost up into upper management and so forth,
right?
From that corporate perspective. But I kind of also knew, deep down inside, is that the days of corporate for me were over. I was at a position where I didn't want to be spoken to. I didn't want to take orders from somebody. I mean, I don't want this to sound arrogant or anything, but those days of taking orders in that 9 to 5 kind of go in, be that cog in some very large structure were over.
That was over for you.
That was that from that point. That was over.
And education was the meal ticket to
I think education was one of the things, not the meal ticket, right?
Okay.
You still need drive and tenacity. Entrepreneurship requires risk, drive, and tenacity. The risk is, it's easy when you're in my position. No wife, no children, no dependencies, no mortgages, no nothing, right? So you can throw your lot in there. And then just, if it doesn't work out, well, bad luck, right? And then you can start all over again. But the drive and the tenacity, you need to be driven, and you need to be tenacious. You need to be hungry for it. And I was, and I still am, And it's something that kind of won't go away. But the drive and the tenacity has become, more smoothed out.
Okay.
It's more strategic. It's more patient.
But that's come with age.
That has come with age. Yeah.
That comes with age.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, so you then embarked on studies.
Yeah, so I
at a mature age.
Yeah.
And
so
you went straight into postgraduate.
Yeah.
And a PhD.
Yeah, so I went into I did an MBA. I did my EMBA at 33. Then I did a double masters of an EMBA and a masters of commerce. And then from that I got accepted into the PhD program at RMIT in Melbourne. It was bad enough having no undergraduate and going into a master's.
Yeah.
This kind of went to another level.
Yeah. Because
as a research candidate, it's not like coursework. You have to be. It's self-directed. You come up with your own research topic. You come up with your own methodology. You come up with your own literature review. And then you have to defend these. And unfortunately for me, I had to defend mine 4 times.
Why 4 times?
Well, I originally started as a master's by research, and I converted mine to a PhD.
Okay.
And the reason I couldn't get straight into the master's is because I didn't have that research background. So they said, if you just go into the master's by research, if your research has PhD merit, then we'll just convert it into a PhD.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing an initial defense, then a midpoint defense for the masters, and at that midpoint defense it actually converted into the PhD.
Okay.
And then I had to do another 2 after that as well.
Yeah. Let's circle back to Indonesia just for 1 second. Did your time there give you the background, and did it give you some context and perspective about your writing with regard to geopolitics? And I'll just introduce that because one of the things that I've found with George was his articles written in the South China Morning Post, which is a most prominent English language newspaper in Hong Kong and southern China. I found George's writing in that newspaper and I was very surprised. And so I wanted to ask, how did you come about, or how did you get to write in that newspaper?
Yeah, look, you're right in the sense that living in Indonesia and watching the emerging markets grow, and you can see those emerging markets, especially around infrastructure, how they were growing, and they were growing exponentially. There was a lot of, and I've also done many trips to China too. I was fortunate enough in 2012 to visit China and India at the same, within 6 months of each other. And it's very telling. I know we don't like to talk about, political models so much, but if in Australia, we compare our democracy or a Western liberal democracy to China's kind of communist system.
Yeah.
But when you compare China's communist system to the Indian system of democracy, where both of them have very much the same characteristics, resource dependent, huge populations,
Developing.
The need middle class and all that sort of stuff. China is light years ahead of the Indian model.
Yeah.
So it kind of one has to ask the question, what system is best for large economies, right? And this, you can go back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau and his book, right, where he talks about large states need to be autocratic, small states can be democratic, right? But however, in the discourse that we have, especially from a Western perspective, the model is Western liberal democracies are the best way to bring prosperity to people. Giving individuals a voice and so forth. But we've seen that China has kind of broken that proposition or that thesis.
Right.
However, for how long we really don't know. Right? But however, you can see if China's progress is an indicator. If progress is an indicator, then we can see that it's certainly working for China. It's maybe not. The democratic route in India might not, as works, but however, not as fast, not as the rate of change as you'd expect, right?
Yep. So how did you get to write for South China Morning Post?
Yeah, it was in 2016. Donald Trump got elected. Naively, I thought that the Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank, the AIIB, would be a very strategic part. It could be a strategic partner to the Trump administration, especially with back then there was, I think it was $2 or $3 trillion worth of infrastructure that needed to be repaired and built and so forth.
Yep. And
the Chinese were awash with money. We can all especially with US treasuries and so forth.
Yeah.
And they could work together and kind of work harmoniously. Right. Yeah. But it was a very naive article. I wrote it. They wanted to know who I was and so forth. I told them I was a PhD candidate, so on and so on and so on.
Yeah.
They liked it and they published it, and I've been publishing ever since.
Okay.
And there's there's about 10 articles that I've written for them. You would have seen I've got my own dedicated page on their op-ed.
Yeah. In
their op-ed section and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of controversial articles that I've written, and
well, controversial in a Western context.
Well, I think for the wider audience, the most there was two that were controversial. The first one was that when Trump announced the trade war with China, I think I was the first person in the world to predict that China would win, and I looked at that through the discipline of strategic management. My academic discipline. And the second one is that I actually predicted that Trump would win the 2020 election. He didn't win. The 2019, I think. Sorry, it was.
The presidential election.
Yeah, that was 2020. Yeah,
2020.
Because the vote came in. Yeah. Anyway, so the article spells out why I think he would win, and one of the biggest factors was the Hunter Biden issue.
Yeah.
And his.
But you got that wrong.
Yeah, I got it wrong. Yes, I did get it wrong. I did get it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I still think that, and in that article that was written in the August before the election.
Right.
My argument is that Trump will look to capitalize on Hunter Biden's background as a way to discredit Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And you could see that the New York Post article was completely shut out of all social media.
Yeah.
And it's kind of come back now with many commentators saying that it could have been a factor that could have swung voters.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I mean, that's the history of it.
How do you tie... So you've obviously got a bit of an audience with your geopolitical articles in the South China Morning Post, and you've got a consulting business, RBV Consulting.
Yep.
I wanted to ask, you're also an Assyrian patriot. I could say that about you.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, how do you reconcile how do you tie up what you know about geopolitics with our own geopolitical plight?
Our people in our ancestral homelands are dwindling. Mm-hmm. And now we live in the diaspora.
Yeah.
And in the diaspora, we are settled.
Mm-hmm.
We're becoming more educated. Mm-hmm. We're becoming wealthier. But that doesn't necessarily mean is that we should not see how we can rekindle our roots back again into the homeland.
Right.
Yeah, I think that everybody has a patriotic duty to their people. I mean, we live in Australia. We're Australians in some way, but we're also Assyrians.
Yeah.
And as I look at what my skill set is, and my skill set is in business and in business and informing business and in business management and so forth.
Yeah.
And that's why we came up with the Assyrian Business Council of Australia. Mm-hmm.
Which is how I met you.
Yeah. So we're in the latter stages of company formation and so forth, and we'll be looking to roll it out towards the second half.
This is like a chamber of commerce.
This is exactly a chamber of commerce.
Okay.
One of the things we need as a community is we need to enrich its members. When we have money and resources, with money we have options, and we can do whatever we like with it. Mm-hmm. We want Assyrians to be enterprising, right? We want Assyrian enterprises, but in order to have Assyrian enterprises, we need individuals to be enterprising, and we need to provide some sort of framework or some sort of quasi-institution that gives them the encouragement and the support and the connection with peers, and so forth. Yep. And that's what we're looking at.
Yep. That's good. Going back to Assyrians and geopolitics, what would you make of our situation today in the homeland geopolitically?
This is the early 20th century 2.0. Right, before we had the Sykes-Picot and the English and so forth, who we became cannon fodder to.
Yes.
And then once the English had gone, we became the cannon fodder again to the US and the other Western powers. They might talk about liberation and Christianity and freedom and all this other sort of stuff, but in the words of Lord Palmerston, we only have interests, as he said. These countries only care about their own interests.
That's right.
And we at the end of the day, we're just like everybody else. If we have to be thrown under the bus, then we have to be thrown under the bus, right? So it is incumbent on us as a people to really reclaim our identity and our position in the Middle East.
How do we assert our own interests?
Well, we have to assert our own interests now by understanding that there's a dire situation, right? and then coalescing, putting away all whatever grievances we have in the past. We need to put away any kind of factionalism that we have. We need to be a unified front, and unified in many ways. We need to look at other cultures and how they've done it. But there's one factor that remains is that we need to build wealth within that community. That wealth, as I said before, wealth will give us options. It is the bedrock for everything that we do. And then we can provide aid, we can lobby, we can take advantage of foreign ownership requirements in those lands, to buy land, to protect it, and so forth. So this is where we have to. But like I go back again, we need a wealthy diaspora.
Yeah. Okay.
And a wealthy diaspora that's willing to share some of that wealth for the greater good.
Do you feel like our past has hindered us?
Of course it has. I mean, I don't want to say, we shouldn't be, we don't want to be the perpetual victim, but we are. I mean, how many times have we been displaced?
Many.
No, but I mean, let's count.
At least 4.
4. I mean, there's about, I've counted 6. I mean, in just over a century. So when we look at that, what other people out there have been displaced 6 times?
None that I can think of.
None that I can think of either. We have legitimate right to say that we are arguably the greatest victim, right, of the 20th century, from the 1915 to 1933 to the Gulf War in 1990. Then we have the 2003. Then we had ISIS in Iraq, and then ISIS in Syria. Right. This has been a huge destabilizing factor.
Yeah.
And our people have dwindled. As our people have moved, some people have moved, intra-Middle East, in the interim of the Middle East, while a significant amount have fled overseas.
Right.
Our presence in the Middle East has lessened and lessened. Our influence in the Middle East has lessened and lessened. Right. And then, there's that intergenerational trauma that comes with it as well. I have to recount this. That one of my uncles, he's my dad's first cousin. On his deathbed, which was just a few years ago, the last breath he took, right? He took his thumb and he ran it over his throat, and he said genocide. Right? And then he closed his eyes and he didn't speak after that, and then he died 2 days later. Right? That trauma still exists. We remember it. You remember it. But this is it's still very real for us. It's not something that we can say happened a century or century and a half ago. We can still remember people that experienced it. We weren't that disconnected from those who actually had to run away from the Semele, right?
But what's that meant for us as a people today? Has that made us more risk averse?
It has made us more risk averse. I think we've done what people usually do is they seek safety, and they don't want to experience those kinds of risks ever again. That's why we find comfort in Australia, in Sweden, in these kinds of countries that are very peaceful. We blend in. We don't want to stick our heads out. We don't want to rock the boat, so to speak. Yeah, this was the default approach that our parents took. Right. We still had the church, here, and the social, the social institutions and so forth. But as political movements and so forth, there were some sort of initiatives that were taken, but they never really took off.
Yeah.
Right. We were always fearful. I remember my dad used to say to me, "Don't get involved in politics."
Why?
But he was always of the mindset of politics in the Middle East, where if you were a communist or something, it wasn't something like, you were just branded as a communist.
Yeah.
You could be, at best, imprisoned.
Yeah.
And at worst, executed.
It's because there was a lot of violence attached to being active in politics in the Middle East.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then and now.
And still now, right?
Yeah.
There are some very brave individuals in the Middle East, especially northern Iraq. I know there's a guy called Khapiel Benjamin.
Mm-hmm. He's been a guest.
I follow him on Twitter, and he's very, very active, especially in regards to some of the human rights abuses that have happened in northern Iraq.
Yes.
But yeah, we have to ask ourselves, what does the diaspora do for him?
Good question. I don't know.
No, I don't know either. Right. However, one of the goals is that a diaspora that's engaged with what's going on, a diaspora who has the resources to do things about it, will not just kind of like and share tweets and posts and so forth. They can provide, substantial material help for individuals such as his. And for all the people that are still in the homeland, you got to remember something, is that we have it quite easy.
Yeah.
Right?
We really do.
We do have it easy here. And, we all like to be Aturaya and Umtanaya and all that sort of stuff, but we can't do it from a distance with no risk. In order for us to really band together.
But I mean, it's something I noticed, just how risk averse we are as a community in the diaspora, and in a society in 2023 where we really need to be fearless.
Well, maybe it's not the fact that we are.
We don't have violence in this society.
No.
We don't have.
Well, maybe it's not the fact that we're risk averse. Maybe it's the fact that we don't have a body politic who can for less of a better term, rally the troops or reinvigorate that, some form of, nationalistic zeal that sits within us. Well, because we all have it. I mean, you've got a hoodie with a Assyrian Torah on the front, right? I have Malika Ashur tattooed on me, right?
Don't tell me where it is.
No, but I'm not going to. But I mean, what I'm trying to say is that we all have something that is Assyrian, right? And we're all quite proud of it. I mean, is it that we're risk averse, or is it that there's nobody, or there's no institution that kind of invigorates that nationalistic zeal that I was talking about? And if there was, that risk that you talk about will slowly dissipate.
But we do have, the community now, it's got to be self-directed as well.
It's got to be self-directed, but it's also got to have leadership that's passionate about it as well, that goes out there. That leadership is about wearing out shoe leather.
Yeah.
You can't lead from the back.
Yeah.
And you need to kind of bring people, right? And the church has done a fantastic job. I have to say, the Church of the East here.
Why?
Well, they've managed. Look, I have to, as somebody, I'm not very religious, right? And I just want to put it out there. I go to all the churches. I don't follow any one of them, whether it's Shah, Isrikham, Shah, Marmari, or whatever. Kind of respect everybody, right? However, the Church of the East under Marimilas over the decades has managed to achieve a lot. And in some ways, I feel quite sorry for him, because he's burdened with the responsibility of not only leading the church, but also being that political leader as well. And being strategic, setting up schools, setting up a nursing home, having the School of Nasibis now, a theological college that they've set up, bringing in migrants, lobbying governments. I mean, this is not the role, this is partly the role of a church head, but this is really the role of a politician.
But that speaks about our community, does it not?
Yeah, it does, and it speaks about the factionalism of our community, right? Where like I said, we can't get together and have one body politic that speaks for all of us. it is that unified front that we need. But I kind of go back. One thing that unifies people is money. I might not like you, Ninos, and you might not like me. However, if there's a financial benefit to it, we put all our differences aside, and we come together to make money. Yeah. So I mean, this is the project of the business council. Is not only for creating enterprise through entrepreneurship, but it's also breaking down those barriers. Breaking down traditional grievances that are for what? For nothing.
Yeah.
For nothing. They're rubbish, right? And bringing people together. And what brings people together? It's money, right? It's wealth. It's opportunity.
In any society.
In any society. In any society. You can bring the two fiercest enemies together, right? Over, over a business deal, over profit. So why can't we do that with our own? And while we've got all these wonderful institutions and all these organisations, I think that again will set the foundation.
Some could argue that's a very cynical way to bring the nation together.
Well, you know what? I'm a realist. And you can call it cynical, you can call it whatever you like. I come from the school of realism, right? And in that school of realism, this is what I found works. I mean, it's nothing nefarious. We're not being overtly opportunistic here, and we're not doing something that's going to harm the community. I mean, if anything, it's the total opposite. I mean, I can only see the benefit in all this. I don't see any downside.
Yeah.
And I do this for clients. I mean, this is I started this with my colleague, and of course you as well, is that this is my stock and trade. Why not do it for us? I do it for clients. And I have this, I think I have strategic foresight.
Well, people pay you for that.
People pay me for that. All I'm doing is just doing what I do for my clients. I add value for my clients.
Yeah. Okay. George Marano, thank you very, very much for joining us on the Assyrian podcast.
Thank you very much, Ninos. It's my pleasure.
And that was episode 194 of the Assyrian podcast with Dr. George Marano. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. And next week, episode 195, we don't want to say much, but we're going to go to the movies. Have a great week.